we would like to introduce you Matthew Manos, who will be talking about peculiar thinking, building a creative mindset with play. He will be talking about what skill set and mindset is needed in order to form connections between otherwise disparate things, a sentence we've heard today already by Michela Magas. Matthew will let us know how we can increase creativity while creating space for innovation in professional projects, day-to-day life and personal work. He is a founder of Very Nice, a design strategy agency, as well as of Reginald, a publisher of Pay What You Want creative problem-solving toolkits. He is an educator, author, and entrepreneur. If you have any questions for Matthew during his talk, you can use the chat option on YouTube again. So, hello, Matthew. Let us know how to be more creative.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here, everyone, and for having me. So if we were to put 100 years of a person's life on a single slide and map out, the amount of work and play that takes place in our day-to-day schedules, we might ultimately see something that looks like this. This probably isn't that surprising to you. Play is ultimately synonymous with childhood. Then around 13 to 15 years old, we're told to grow up. Then we enter our 20s, we're told to go to work. Then maybe 40-ish years later, if we're lucky, we retire, find ourselves struggling to learn how to play again, and ultimately spend all of our time taking quizzes on Facebook. This timeline feels incredibly normal, but it should not be normalized. In fact, we need to play. Play has been proven to do several things: improve memory, stimulate creativity, improve brain functions, and even reduce stress. I've spent my life so far focusing on three different things: social impact, entrepreneurship, and education. Let's start with social impact and entrepreneurship for a second. These two areas have several things in common, but one of those things is stress. I was browsing the internet the other day, and I found out that The Guardian has a professional network comprised of thousands of nonprofit employees and leaders. And in a survey response that they released to their members, 93% of respondents indicated that they are stressed out at work either all, some, or a lot of the time. 93%. And this is consistent with what I've personally observed working with thousands of people from over 700 nonprofit organizations across the globe over the past 15 years through my practice, Very Nice. We're most well known for our impact model, in which we give half of our services away for free to nonprofits and social enterprises. According to a study by Hannah Law of the YMCA, despite being more emotionally engaged, nonprofit employees are typically under more stress and burnout than in any other industry that we see. If you ask around, it doesn't take very long to find out where this stress is coming from, though. First, nonprofits are notorious for issues with funding, leading to intense life or death fundraising deadlines constantly. Second, nonprofits, especially smaller ones, generally face a lack of resources, causing many organizations to spread internal teams quite thin and to exhaust them. And finally, high levels of care-based work and consistent exposure to intense realities, as you can imagine, is emotionally exhausting. For those of you in the audience that work in the startup space or with small businesses, the first two are probably resonating with you right now. Funny enough, in a viral article from Inc. From a few years ago, these exact same issues were revealed to be prominent, but actually kind of taboo amongst entrepreneurs. In The Psychological Price of Entrepreneurship, Jessica Bruder shares several stories of the trials and tribulations of growing a business. In her article, she cites a study from Gallup Healthways in which 45% of entrepreneurs admit to stress at work, a figure several percentage points higher on average than workers. So, as someone that spent my entire career working with entrepreneurs and nonprofits, it appears as though I specialize in working with some of the most stressed out people around. And on a personal note, I'm also one of those people that struggle with stress and burnout fairly consistently. As a result, it's no surprise that play has become a major tool for me to better engage with clients and communities while also making the work that I do more tolerable for myself. Models of Impact is a role playing and ideation game that simulates the process of launching a social enterprise. Through an emphasis on play and collaboration, the game teaches people about socially responsible business. I developed the initial mechanics for this game in 2011 and released it to the public in 2014. It has now been played by over 50,000 people across 150 countries. Models of Impact is proposing that every business model should be reimagined to prioritize impact and revenue equally. If we only have an impact model, we might feel very fulfilled, but that sense of fulfillment will be really short lived out of necessity to survive. If we only have a revenue model, we might accrue some wealth, but will ultimately face burnout due to that lack of purpose. Waking up every day just to make money gets old at some point. The game also includes a glossary full of over 200 different business models that have been successfully used by individuals and organizations working across the public, private, and social sectors. At the center of the game's experience is randomization. Players utilize polyhedral dice, much like what you might find in Dungeons and Dragons, in order to combine randomly impact models, revenue models, and a slew of other factors to inspire a new idea. So let me show you a quick example. You'll see I'm armed with my trusty 12-sided die here. And what I have here are 12 impact models, 12 revenue models, and 12 other factors, which are just things that pre-pandemic life were apparent in my day-to-day reality. Things like walking the dog, drawing, taking public transit, etc. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this 12-sided die in order to roll one item from each of these and then possibly embarrass myself by improvising a new business pitch for you on the spot right here. So my first model is number 11. That's my impact model of access to education. So this would be any kind of business idea that is trying to make education more affordable or accessible to people. My revenue model is number 6, which is donations. That's a tricky model that is purely donation based. There's not necessarily an exchange or an expectation of the amount that's donated. And then I have number 12, which is traveling. So this is kind of an interesting combination. What I might come up with here is and let's pretend that COVID doesn't exist for a second, although it truly does. So don't take that. Don't quote me on that. So let's say that we have some kind of a traveling experience that students can use to learn about real historical sites all around the world, and therefore they are being educated through that experience in numerous ways. But it's donation driven, as in different companies perhaps sponsor these trips so that the trips are completely affordable or free to these students. This is kind of one example of a type of an idea that might come out of an exercise like this through a game mechanic that's known as forced association. The game is highly informed by my work building Very Nice's Give Half model, which balances impact and revenue as well. We use this game with clients and communities across the globe to imagine new products and services that can balance impact and revenue. We worked with the American Heart Association to imagine new future business opportunities for the organization, with Mozilla to rethink the company's approach to kind of creative onboarding, and with the USC Iovine and Young Academy, where I'm an assistant professor of design, to teach social entrepreneurship and to teach business models in a really unique way. Now, topics like the ones models of impact deal with are actually quite serious. For example, the selection of a business model can mean life or death for an organization. Similarly, the approach an organization takes to generate impact can lead to serious implications on the community that it serves. And so this is work I take very seriously, but making this work playful doesn't make it less serious. Quite the opposite, actually. Instead, it makes it inclusive. Playful approaches to strategy and innovation tend to cut the jargon and more seamlessly challenge the status quo due to encouraging creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, and a touch of humor. It takes the fear of starting out of the equation. Playful approaches create an illusion that anything is possible. We're just playing, so why not think differently? Why not just take a moment to imagine an entirely different path? In doing so, we can get our teams to take the obstacles, whether perceived or actual, out of the way for a moment to just think about the challenge in front of us as humans. It creates space for new ideas. Playful approaches often leverage the vocabulary of games, things like competition or speed or constraints, each of which have a natural ability to help participants spark new ideas. With less fear or, of what others might say or kind of lack of confidence of what people might think, or where that kind of common saying of, oh, we've tried that before, maybe goes away for a second. To be frank, my clients in the public, private, and social sector don't call me when nothing is wrong, right? I almost always am working in the realm of decisions that have serious implications on the future of a business, organization, or industry. And this is likely the kind of work that many of you find yourselves in as well. But if we say no to play, even more serious implications may be faced. This is because when we don't play, the work can suffer from exclusivity, from stuckness, and from complacency. Play, especially when expanded to interactivity and immersive experience, is also an incredible tool for learning. During the lockdown, my wife and I rewatched the 1989 sci-fi classic Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Maybe you've seen it. If you haven't, it's a story of two metalhead slackers that have to travel time in order to prepare for an oral history report. Throughout their journey, they meet a bunch of fun characters like Genghis Khan, Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc, and even Socrates. And in doing so, they manage to accomplish something that they could never do in the classroom, which is retain key facts about historical events and figures. In the classroom, I do my best to replicate Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for my own students. Now, I don't have a time machine, but I am a big proponent of challenge and project-based learning, in which students can work in teams to tackle problems with real-world implications. In addition, I'm excited about the potential of applying play to educational experiences that can empower us to engage more critically with our community and local issues. Robert, a lot of what we're talking about is creativity and ideas. And Robert Epstein, a psychologist and visiting scholar at UCSD, has this great quote. He says, "There's not really any evidence that one person is inherently more creative than another." To back this up, Epstein did a study with Orange County government officials close to where I live in California. It included 74 people, and it took place over the course of 8 months. And through a series of playful activities and exercises, he was actually able to increase the participants' ability to generate new ideas by 55%. Pretty remarkable. From this, Epstein learned 4 things. First, capture your new ideas. And this is, something that many of you might resonate with. You might come up with an idea while you're in the shower or while you're out on a walk. Always have something near you where you can capture that before that moment of idea or moment of creativity flees. The second, which is my favorite, is seek out impossible tasks. One of the things that is recommended by him and some other psychologists in this space is, for example, to attempt to make your dog fly. Now, this is something that cannot actually be done. Sadly, dogs cannot fly. But by trying to do something impossible and having your mind think through that, what you're doing is you're having your old ideas compete. And that actually leads to new ideas, is what these scientists have found. The third is to diversify your knowledge. Pick up a book from an industry or a discipline that you are in no way familiar with. This is going to allow you to be able to unlock some of this forced association of comparing problems and opportunities in your space to problems and opportunities in another space to generate new ideas. And then finally, surround yourself with interesting things and people. Meeting new people, collecting things, gaining inspiration from these things can also be a real source of creativity that's quite playful. And speaking of play, that is really what unites these 4 suggestions, along with a willingness to be a bit peculiar. And what I mean by that is to constantly seek out new things, to not be afraid of serendipitous exploration, and to just trust your instincts. We all have an ability to disrupt day to day pressures in a playful way, while also engaging people in critical issues of business and of society. By integrating play into our office, classroom, and community center and boardroom, we can reap its benefits while also engaging participants in a more productive way. So I'm here to say, let's be more playful. And I want to leave you with just a few questions to kind of consider as you're moving throughout the rest of your week and throughout the rest of your year. How can we make more time and space for play in our work? Right? How is that something that you can better set up for yourself, for your team, as you look into 2021 and start to set up goals around that? Similarly, thinking about your customers or your clients, how can the products and services that we develop be more playful? How can you integrate play into that sort of experience that your clients or your customers go through with you? And how can they associate play with you in order to, again, maybe take some of these very serious topics or very serious needs and make them a bit more accessible and enjoyable? And then finally, how can we better engage our teams, clients, and communities with playful moments to increase productivity and happiness? I think this is really critical, especially in the spaces, of social impact, of entrepreneurship, of education, places that I think can really benefit from this. But I'm sure there are many, many more based on the spaces that you all work within as well. When we prioritize play in our day to day lives and work, we ultimately create the space for playful impact. And that's what I'd like to see more of in the world. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to answer any questions that might have come up, and hope that you all have enjoyed the day so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Here for yes, big applause.
Thank you. You're welcome. It was great. It was great to be here.
Thank you very much. I really like the idea of becoming more playful in our daily life. I'm just thinking of enjoying to vacuum cleaning at home or doing my taxes, and everything is all of a sudden a huge game that would be just perfect. But that's not that easy, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
designing a game and really having the play factor in something, in a process or a product, or even, as you mentioned, a business model, isn't that a very specific competence?
Yeah, it is. And what I would suggest, I think there's two ways to go about this. One is to really try your best to integrate that into the core that you're speaking to, like to that business model, to that product, to that service. I think that there are ways to get creative about making that happen. But the other side of things would be to try to fit play in between your serious moments of the day. So, for example, if you're working, for 8 hours during the day, or for 10 hours, or maybe it's one of those crazy days where it's 12 hours, how can you book time for yourself to let your mind wander creatively? Maybe that is by doodling. Maybe that's by watching some kind of video from an artist that you're excited about, whatever that might be. That, I think, is your best plan B if you can't integrate it directly into your product, and will ultimately, really benefit you as the day goes on. I've found personally.
Thank you.
Well, I was wondering if you start to integrate play in companies into your daily life, it might mean for some people to step out of their comfort zones. So, how do you involve them in play? Can you share some experiences maybe on how to approach this?
Absolutely. So the most common place where you see my work in doing this, very nice. My company focuses very much on developing workshops for creative problem solving. So we come in and we do a workshop experience with a business or with an organization, and then we use that as sort of the source of inspiration for further consulting that we do with them. And the workshop is really where I found the biggest opportunity for play to be integrated. But to your point, very much so, people can be out of their comfort zone. And so, one trick that I use is I actually try to, before getting people directly into the position where they have to perform their creativity or perform this playfulness in front of all of their colleagues, which I think is the big source of fear of how will I be perceived? Am I coming up with good ideas? All of these things. I have them just personally take a stack of Post-it notes or a sheet of paper and just make something for themselves. So I almost always start workshops with personal reflections. And I think that this is a really great way to ease people into the process of thinking creatively without feeling like they need to share it immediately. Because I found that that is the biggest fear factor. The other trick that I use as a facilitator, which I think this works whether it's a workshop setting or not, is to actually make a little bit of a fool of myself. And so what I mean by that is when I'm demonstrating something, for example, demonstrating rolling the dice today, that was like an okay idea. It wasn't the most genius idea in the world. And if it was the most genius idea in the world, I think I would have all of a sudden created a culture of or a feeling of being intimidated to even step up and try. It's kind of like when an art teacher is, teaching you to draw and they go to the chalkboard and it's like something out of Leonardo da Vinci's Notebook. You kind of look at this chalkboard and you're like, I can't do that. Forget it. Right. But if they draw a stick figure, I think more people would be willing to play. So a little bit of, being willing to stumble yourself, I think is a very inviting practice.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Now we have some questions here also in the chat. Someone wants to have another short game example, maybe in a moment. I think they like the rolling the dice for a new business model. But maybe first, how do you best capture your ideas? Still a good old notebook or anything more hyper fancy?
So I purely use a notebook myself. That's something that has been really helpful over the years because I feel like one of my to know how to capture your own ideas, you need to know where your ideas often die or get lost. And for me, if I'm spending too much time on the computer, I'm sure this is very familiar for some people. I get distracted. I might go on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, get caught in some kind of YouTube rabbit hole and completely forget the idea that I had. So when I eliminate distractions, which for me tends to be the screen, it really helps me. That said, I did recently get an iPad and I started playing with the app called Procreate, which is a really great sort of drawing application on there. And I've found that I've started to enjoy using that similarly to how I've used a physical notebook in the past. So I would say those two things, but 90% of the time it would be, a traditional moleskin notebook or a stack of Post-it notes like this.
Or maybe even a telephone if that's close to hand as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Another question is here. Could you share some examples of better engaging teams with playful moments?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I can give a few examples. One very recently, we were working with a team on their strategic plan, and this was going to be a plan for about a 5-year duration. So, very serious project because it's trying to understand the future of the company. But what we found is that a lot of people struggle to imagine the future because it's such an abstract thing. And so what we did is we actually similarly with dice, and I have the 12-sided in front of me. I have the 20-sided right here. I use dice in everything. What I had done is I rolled this dice, and maybe you can do this at home, now or later. And I said, okay, everybody, imagine it is 18 years in the future. Write in a single sentence what you're up to. And that is just kind of a really simple, again, kind of example of a good personal reflection oriented game that got people into the headspace of the future so that we could then talk about the future of the company, in a bit more of a confident way or in a way in which we're prepared as well. So maybe that's something for you all to try at home. What are you up to in 18 years in the future? What are you up to, or what does the world look like at that point? Is a fun thing to kind of consider.
Yeah, simple but very effective, I think. Just another question about your work and your team background, since we are talking about cross-innovation here today, and the agency, which with a great name, very nice. I like that a lot. What kind of competences do you have in your teams? Are you all games designers, or what kind of backgrounds do you have?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have three primary areas of focus, and I would say games goes throughout all of them. But game design is, funny enough, not a service we offer. It's more infused within the other services we offer. So we work in three different areas. One is in experience design, which I think borrows a lot from gaming culture. But that is anything from digital product development to user experience design and information architecture. And then we also work within brand strategy, so helping businesses better position themselves, create new mission and vision statements, et cetera. And then strategic foresight, where we work with people on their strategic planning or on future scenarios for the space that they're operating within. For each of those, we have games that we play and sort of tools that we use. These are all mentioned. You mentioned in my bio earlier, Reginald, which is my creative problem solving toolkit publishing practice. That's kind of a mouthful. That is where we publish all of our tools, though. So if anybody is interested in seeing literally every type of game that we use, you'd be able to get that at reginald.co. And I guess a shameless plug, from now until end of day tomorrow, we're donating $1 for every download we get to the Michael J. Fox Foundation to benefit Parkinson's disease research. These are all free downloads, so that's a great way to help support us in a good cause right now.
Would you maybe share another tool to create randomness? You are a fan of dice, but is there maybe something you would like to share from your creative problem solving toolkit?
Yeah, I mean, I am a huge fan of dice, and I'll say I have every type of dice imaginable, including a 120-sided die that I'm still trying to figure out what on earth I can do with it, but I do have it. Aside from that, one thing that I've enjoyed doing, which is very much inspired by the Situationists, sort of an artistic movement from many years ago, is doing randomized walks throughout my neighborhood. And so what I'll do is I'll give myself different prompts. Walk 100 steps and take a picture of the first living thing that you see. Walk another 100 steps, take a picture of the first non-living thing you see. And then maybe think of what's an idea that could combine these two things. That's a really fun example of integrating randomization into just a walk that you might have gone on anyways, to kind of, again, maybe trigger new ideas, even if that idea is a bit ridiculous. The psychologists have found that it ultimately can help challenge your old ideas and maybe lead to new stuff. So that's fun. Other forms of randomization that I use is in the way that I form teams in terms of workshops or in my classes as an educator. And this is very relevant to the topic of the conference, trying to have a randomized assortment of different backgrounds and disciplines at the table, so that you're not always working with another designer or another architect or whatever that might be, but instead you're able to engage with people from different backgrounds as well. So that would be another thing I would advocate for. And you can always put numbers on a piece of paper, rip it up and put it in a hat and grab something too, if you're looking for a non-dice way of rolling things randomly.
Thank you very much for sharing all these different activities or exercises. We will keep them in mind. We have one last question here, real quick. Do you still enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, or do you always make up new business models with the risk of burnout, getting back to the stress in the beginning? How much do you work with play?
Yeah, well, so funny enough, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I just like dice. But I use the models of impact process very consistently, though. And I think one thing that's really helpful to mention is when I'm rolling this dice, I'm not always necessarily trying to then start that business. I'm more trying to get myself to think about business in a new way. which ultimately then triggers some kind of idea or sparks some kind of new idea that I can apply to what I'm working on right now as well. But yes, I do still love playing that game constantly. Dungeons and Dragons is hard to play right now, though, especially because you can't be with a very big group of people. Although I hear that some have fun doing it online too.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. I think we will all, at least I will, take your curve with me and hope to see that I will rise the playful curve a little bit in comparison to the work or the stress curve, maybe combine play and work much more than before. Thank you very much for being with us here today from California, Matthew Manos.